Hey, what's up, everybody? We are live for List Building School, and this is panel 8. And I'm really excited for this one. It's all about how to leverage online appearances or kind of publicity to build authority and grow your email list rapidly. And we have Andreea Matei, Jesse Krieger, and Dmitry Dragilev here with me. And we were supposed to have also Mary Fernandez, but she couldn't make it here. But for Premium Pass students, she actually was kind enough to record a great training on how to grow your list with guest blogging. So you still get some of Mary's knowledge when it comes to guest blogging there if you're a Premium Pass student, but you couldn't make it to this panel. So we have some people live here. We see some, regulars. They shopped every single one, so it's going to be cool here. But before we kind of get into questions and all this, I wanted to start off with, introduction here. First, let's start with Andreea. And I know we've known each other for quite a while. You were featured on my first summit, the Branding Summit. You've been on Creative Live teaching publicity classes too. So tell us a little bit what you're all about and how publicity has helped you grow your business. And I know you have two sides of it. You have your e-commerce business and you have your personal brand as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting for me with publicity. It's been part of my marketing strategy ever since I've had my first online business, which was a t-shirt business. And I had this big dream of being featured in Oprah magazine. And I thought if I can get featured in Oprah magazine, then everyone's going to buy my t-shirts and I'm going to, make it, so to speak. So I have been a huge fan of publicity ever since I started my business. And then as I started to get my t-shirts featured into a ton of magazines and online blogs, a lot of other entrepreneurs started reaching out to me and saying, hey, how did you get featured in so-and-so magazine? Can you teach me how to do it? So I started teaching other entrepreneurs that had physical products how to actually get their products featured in magazines as well. So that's for the e-commerce side. But then also having my own personal brand, publicity is super important as well. So I have done everything from being featured at Creative Live, as you said, which is a huge way to get publicity, to speaking on many different stages. I've even been featured on a billboard in Times Square in New York. I've been featured in a ton of magazines and online blogs, on podcasts. So you name it, I've done it. I've done guest blogging. So every sort of form of publicity that you can think of, I've tried it out and I've done it.
Awesome. And we can take some questions around that later as well here. If you have anything for Andreea, if you have any, from your audience too, I know you sent quite a few people to the summit. If you have like an online store or e-commerce business, that's obviously a good way you can direct those to Andreea. But now to Jesse Krieger, best-selling author and, being good friends for several years now. And I'm interested a little bit how this plays a role for you. Obviously, tell us a little bit about your business, what you do in terms of your publishing business, and then how publicity is helping yourself and your clients, maybe become bestsellers and grow their email lists.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Navid. I think you've done an amazing job so far with List Building School, and it seems like people are just loving it. So that's great to see. For me, I run a book publishing company called Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, and I'm myself an author as well of a book called Lifestyle Entrepreneur. And, how I've used publicity, I think as a result of my own book, I would get 1 to 3 inbound media requests a week through my blog and through other ways in which I gave people the opportunity to contact me in my book. And that ended up being a great way to give a longer lifespan and really grow my audience, but give a longer life to the book. And over like 18 months or so, they would still come in. So, for me, I feel pretty good and comfortable with like conversational type of formats, interview, video, and audio, more so than say like writing or something that's more blog based. So I really decided to go all in on doing podcasts and video and live broadcast. So, in another sense, similarly, like Navid, when you helped me out with the book business and brand building summit, that was another way of using sort of publicity and live broadcast to build a list. And so I think doing a summit is also a great way to blend some of the things that we're talking about here today.
Definitely. Great.
In terms of for our authors, we definitely do a lot of strategy around like which audiences they can get in front of. And we have sort of a media list that we use internally to make introductions to podcast hosts, people that write for different publications. And it's an important part of any author's strategy to get out in front of new audiences of people that can become ultimately their readers, but also their customers and clients.
For sure. We can see maybe we have even some authors or writers here in the chat. Feel free to let us know. And, Jesse is a good person to direct questions to if you have anything around that, because he's published, I think it's like 20 or more now best-selling books. At least soon it's gonna grow quite quick, very fast. And you have like a lot you're publishing this fall as well. So let's leave it over to Dmitry. I know you have kind of a unique background too. You sold like a company to Google? Wasn't it Google you mentioned earlier to me, like when we talked, and I was like, wow, this is impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, share a little bit about that and how Publicity helped you do that.
Yeah, so I guess I was like a nobody, an introvert. I came over here from Russia, didn't know anything about publicity or PR, and found myself in Silicon Valley starting to help with marketing and startups, but still was just striking out every time I tried PR or exposure. And just kind of started teaching myself how to reach out to journalists and influencers to actually secure gigs to work at startups. And yeah, we just worked on a company called Polar, where we use kind of PR outreach to grow it very, very fast from like 0 to 40 million page views through mainly creating polls and studies and embedding them in different articles and publications. And so through that, I became kind of guest contributor to most major publications where I write day to day now. And we grew it to 40 million page views, and that was sold to Google in 2014. But before that, I mainly kind of did SEO stuff and lots of kind of coding, heavy coding, and never really touched marketing. So the last 9 years or so, I've been doing PR. And yeah, all my business, everything that I do today now to PR. Started my SaaS company after the acquisition, and nothing to 2,000 paying customers, and all through just content and PR and SEO. Became friends with, VaynerMedia folks, Gary Vaynerchuk from VaynerMedia, Matt Mullenberg from WordPress, just Kevin Hartz from Eventbrite, Ashton Kutcher. It was crazy, like just through cold email outreach and building relationships through providing value.
That's great.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I'm more of a different background. Never did this for a living right up until 9 years ago, but kind of started doing it and then just never stopped, and published over 1,300 articles at this point, and just been going forward with it. And yeah, it's fun.
Awesome. And we can ask you more about like how you do these cold outreach. I think a lot of people would like to know how you did cold outreach to getting from that. But let's start with Andreea in terms of like we have a lot of beginners here, obviously, and I would love to hear from some people in the chat where you would like to get featured, and maybe have some dream places around the web where you would like to get featured. So maybe you can type that in the chat too, so you know a little bit where you're coming from, what industry you're in, and then we can help you even more. But in terms of like when you started out, Andreea, what would you recommend to someone when they're gonna get into publicity, especially when it comes to like growing your list from doing all this? Because it's obviously some you can spend as much time, right? So you're gonna get your time's worth pretty much when you're doing this. So where would you start in terms of list building if you wanted to focus on publicity for that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And one of the things that I did when I first started is that I made sure that I was really specific, and I knew who my audience was, because yeah, it's great if I am featured on a top blog, but because my audience are e-commerce entrepreneurs, if that blog doesn't have e-commerce entrepreneurs as readers, I'm probably not going to be able to grow my list. So I was very strategic from the beginning, and I knew that my audience were entrepreneurs who sold on Etsy, entrepreneurs that have physical products and e-commerce stores. So I specifically targeted media outlets that had those different markets. And that definitely helped me to grow my list, because when I would provide tips, for example, one of the things that I did when I first started out is that I was teaching a course on how to use Pinterest for e-commerce, and I knew that I wanted to be featured on a blog specifically for e-commerce. So I made a list of my top blogs that I wanted to be featured in, and I started reaching out to every single one of them. But instead of saying, hey, I launched a course on Pinterest, can you write about it? Which does never works that way because it's all about what's in it for them and what value can you provide for them. So when I would reach out to these blogs, I would say, hey, I was reading your post on Facebook, for example, and I noticed that you cover social media. And as you know, Pinterest is really hot right now. Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, but there's a lot of different myths about it. And I have some of those myths and tips that your audience can use when they use Pinterest to really grow their business. So that definitely helped me to get in and for them to say yes, because I was actually providing them value and I was giving them something valuable to their readers. So they weren't necessarily writing about me, but they were sharing my tips and my strategies. And then at the end, I would say, for example, if it was a blog about fashion, I would say, here, I've created a really awesome download. Again, those content upgrades, right? I've created a really awesome download about 20 different ideas for Pinterest boards for fashion entrepreneurs. So I would make it really specific to them, and then people would opt into that. And that's how I was able to grow my list through those guest blogging opportunities, especially in the beginning. But really my strategy was to find the right audience that was reading my blog in addition to all of these other blogs that were relevant, and reach out with something of value. So I would never reach out and say, please write about me because I'm so cool and I'm so interesting. And instead I would say, here's something of value that I have for your readers that I think they would really enjoy. Would you be interested in sharing that with them? So that's my number one tip when you're starting out, is to know what value you can provide and get really specific in terms of who you're targeting and their audience.
Awesome. And let's see here if you have anything in the chat. Someone says, I pitched 15 radio stations and only got one because they have an authors feature. How do I take the other 17? Is the key in the press release? Sure.
Oh, can I say something about that?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I do hear the word press release a lot. And usually when people think about PR, they think about, oh, let me write a press release and all of a sudden I'm going to get featured. And I actually wrote a post on my blog when I first started out, because I thought press releases were the key too, right? So I hired someone to write one and had it distributed and spent a whole bunch of money on that. But I got 0 results from my press release, and I then wrote a post called why I ditched the press release and what I do instead. And it's all about, press releases are great, but they're not great when you are, it also depends on the industry. And you can send a press release when you're reaching out, but it can't just be the press release. It has to be a sentence or two from you as to why they should be interested in reading that press release and how it's going to help their readers. And I get pitched all the time too, now that I have my own blog and I do writing. And anytime someone just sends me a press release without an intro, I delete it right away. So press releases are good. Just make sure if you are pitching with a press release that you have an intro and address the person you're pitching to personally and let them know how your press release is relevant to them.
Yeah, totally. I might say a few words on it too. We have, so I run Just Reach Out. It's basically a tool for startups, small businesses to pitch journalists, and we have 2,000 paying customers. I do support for all of them. So they ask me help for their pitches, and they always send some kind of PR release they're putting together. And most of the time, I usually just shoot a note back saying, dude, this is just not going to work. There was a study that was done, 500 journalists, it's on growthhackers.com. They asked 500 journalists, what do you want in your pitch? Like, how long do you want it to be? What kind of stuff do you want in there? It's awesome. It's free. It's on growthhackers.com. And like 90% of them basically said the pitch should be 200 words or less and should be 65 characters as a topic. And so that's the actual keys that I like to use when I reach out to journalists and influencers. And so PR releases, just something you, like Andreea was saying, something that you might include in there, but focus on your 200 words and 65 characters in the subject line.
Yeah, totally. All right, that's great. I want to dive into a little bit the pitches too more, but I see that we have some authors here. as well. So I wanted to leave it over to kind of Jesse to talk a little bit about your strategy for, I guess, getting publicity and, what you're focusing on to get, grow your email list from that, because obviously that's really of importance for authors as well. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, what the conversation I have with authors that I'm working with, as well as with authors if I'm doing some type of a training with, really revolves around like choosing which channel of communication you're most comfortable with. So, sometimes you'll see somebody who looks really good on video and you may not feel as comfortable doing video, and then you could psych yourself out and be like, oh, I'm not as good as video as this person, but maybe you're great at writing, or maybe you have a great visual and design sense. So you could build a community on, a blog or on something like Pinterest or Instagram that's more image centric. I think the real trick is finding which channel, which means of communication you like, and picking one or two to start, and then really understanding the people that are doing, writing, publishing podcasts, people that are in the media within your area of focus, and reach out in similar ways to Andreea was talking about, reach out in ways similar to Dmitry was talking about, initiate the conversation from a position of value, and put yourself forth as somebody that has expertise, advice, strategies to add to their audience, right? Because when you're talking to somebody in the media, sure, you have to make an impression on them, but you ultimately want to make the impression on their audience. So if you can position yourself in a way that makes it easy for them to say yes, and they know they're going to get a quality piece of content or a good segment from featuring you, then you're doing their work for them. And, it's an approach that I really recommend. It's the same as having like, a blog, if you're doing it in a blogging sense, having one or two really good articles ready. And as you're reaching out, being like, here's a summary, maybe 200 words. And if you want to read the whole article, here it is. And I'd be happy to modify it to fit your audience or whatnot. Things like that. Even, when you're asking people to mail for you, which is also a great way to get exposure, is, accessing people through their mailing list, their audience. A lot of what I do now, and I know you have done as well, Navid, is like offer free training sessions to people, no pitch, no sales offer, only at the end of doing a free training on a topic. For me, I do like a publishing masterclass, which I just offer for free. And if people are interested at the end, they can fill out an application to have a conversation around publishing, right? So in the process, I'm building my list, getting exposure to somebody's audience and leveraging their credibility, and ultimately using it as, a feeder without focusing on all of these conversion techniques to drive more sales on a live broadcast and stuff of this nature. So, to get out there, to build your name as an author, I think choose a channel, identify 1 to 3, aspects of your topic, your area of expertise that you can provide immediate value on, and then position yourself in a way where it makes it so easy for the other person to say yes, that if they do, they get visibility and coverage in that sense.
Sure. And someone asking here in the chat if you can link to that blog post, Andreea. Maybe you have the blog post. You can link that if you want. And Dmitry mentioned something too.
Yeah, about the PR outreach.
Yeah. If you have that, feel free to link it.
Yeah, I mean, you can see all of the press that I've gotten if you go to launchgrowjoy.com. I think it's /press. And you can see like all of the hundreds of media mentions that I've had and the different strategies that I've used, everything from guest posting to podcasts to online features. But there was one thing that I wanted to mention because Andy was saying a post on the subject, and I immediately thought about what about the subject line of your pitch? Because I know that's a question that a lot of people ask me all the time is, okay, that's great. I know what to put in the email, but what should I put in the subject line? And I think for me, and I've sent out thousands, tens of thousands of emails, the thing that works the most for me, and even when I get pitched as well, is when someone either uses my name or my company name in the subject line. And that's a pretty sure way that I'm gonna open their email. So if someone pitches me and their subject line is, Andreea, I have an idea for launchgrowjoy.com, which has my business name, my website, and my name in there, I am pretty much guaranteed I'm going to open that email. As opposed to, new e-commerce study shows that conversion rates, whatever, like that, even though it's relevant to me, it never grabs my attention as much as when someone says my name and my company name. So I always recommend to make sure you include at least one of those two things in your subject line.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you could have the best email, the best offer, the best book in the world. And if somebody doesn't open up the email, then you miss out on all of that opportunity. And maybe you have something to chime in here as well, Navid, because I know you've tested a lot of this, but it was interesting to see for me the dramatic difference in open rates based on subject lines. So like Andrea's tip of using your personal name and then something that's directly applicable to your business. Things I've found are like if I'm mailing to my list or even for this summit, the PDF download in brackets followed by something like the 2016 list building playbook is an insane response compared to a subject line that's like, join me for a virtual summit.
Yeah.
And so like, it's all leading people to the same place, but there's something to be said about coming in with a bang with something that's really compelling and makes your first impression one of, hey, I'm getting a lot of value right off of the bat, helps lead people further into your business or into future media opportunities by taking that approach.
Totally. And actually I've tested a few too. Like I reached out to John Lee Dumas of EO Fire when I was going to be there. I think I said, I forgot exactly how I titled that, but like, let me rock like Fire Nation, or let me add the massive value. I mean, there was something like this. And obviously I included actually his tribe in the subject line there. And that was the key. Although I knew him a little bit, but still he gets a ton of emails. So he's still going to grab their attention in their inbox, which is kind of what Andrea talks about too here. She gets a lot of emails. And then if she sees her name there, it's more likely they will open. Same when you're sending emails to your list, but don't overdo this, guys. I've seen people like to their own list, every time they email the list, they include my name. And I tuned out from the list because it was so annoying. They were like including my name every single time in the subject line and like overdid it in the email too. So don't do that too. It can be annoying eventually, but that just like their name in this, that works. Even when I reached out for affiliates and partners, I did like say, hey, like regarding this launch, let's say they promoted another launch, I mentioned that, like something that they could relate to.
Something that really helped me a lot when I reach out is I identify one point of commonality between me and the person I'm reaching out to. So for example, I know the founder content marketer Sujan Patel. Mm-hmm. So I do research and find who wrote about them. And then, my little boy here came in. And I basically try and find out who's written about it. So the subject line says, I'm friends with Sujan. You mention his tool, and that's it. And then from there on, then the email starts, and then I can start the email and talk about something completely different. But because you identify that one piece of connection between the two, you and your prospect, it just works. People open it. I get open 60, 70% usually. Wow. And then 40% response rate. And I'm pitching them to, to do some PR thing. But
what do you, so let me ask you this. So how like this subject line is obviously really important, but then in the email, how do you normally phrase the email to get, results and get people to say yes to your request? Maybe you can give a specific
How do
example.
I follow up or?
No, the email itself, like the first email.
My boy wants to say hello to everybody. Yeah. Hi. Okay.
Lock the door. Lock the door.
I'm gonna have to lock the door. But so the first.
It's live, guys. It's authentic. It's live. We can't do anything about that. So it's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
My 2-year-old just got home. But anyway.
Yeah. So let me take that question again in case people didn't hear it. So like when you're reaching out to people, obviously the subject line and all this, you identify this, but can you give me a specific example, like for something so people can relate to that, and then how you phrase the email, like what went into that email, like when you reached out cold to someone.
Yeah. So here's an exact email. It says your mention of content marketer, comma, I'm friends with founder. That's the subject line. It starts with with just lowercase. And basically I got a list of 180 bloggers with domain authority of 50 and higher. Domain authority, for anybody who's listening doesn't understand, It's how you measure popularity of a site or a blog. So if you're pitching a blog and you want to build a connection with them, you want a blog that has a bigger domain authority that can, has an audience that reads it. And so I filtered it, and I have virtual assistants who create a list for me of 180 contacts. And so I go through that list really quick to see if I know anybody on that list, to make sure I remove them from the list. And basically, so I say, hey, Noor, I'm the founder of Just Reach Out. I help startups, entrepreneurs, hack pitching press. I stumbled across your article, and I show the article to them. You mentioned content marketer. I'm an old friend of Sujan Patel. We actually write articles together for Forbes, which we do. And I tell them, hey, I'm a regular contributor, entrepreneur, TechCrunch, HuffPo, Mashable, The Next Web. And I grew this last startup and got acquired by Google. And now I have this new thing. It's got 2,000 customers. So I wanted to ask you two things. I got some PR hacks and some interesting content that I wanted to kind of share with you for your blog. I see that you're interested in this kind of stuff and you're writing about content marketers. So I picked a tool that's kind of similar to mine, but not really a competitor. So I know this guy is writing about it, but he's not really, writing about something that's competitive. And I know that he's interested in it because he's mentioned it. And I also know that it's a recent article, so it has to be within the last year. And so, like, two things. One, I have some content for you. I want to chat with you. And then two, I want to give you free trial for my tool. I know that you dig this stuff and would love to hear your feedback. Respect, your work. Thank you so much. Have an awesome Friday, Dmitry. And so that's my first email. And now most of the subject line, most of the people won't respond right away. So I have about four follow-ups. They're just one-liners, and they're usually kind of like, just wondering if you received my email. Then 2 days later, hey, just give me a 1 if you're just crazy busy, slammed, and I know you are. It's Tuesday. Give me a 0 if you're just don't want to receive any more stuff from me. I totally understand. And so those are the follow-ups that they get, and they get 3 or 4. And it all works really well. But more than 50% respond usually.
Wow.
To this kind of thing. A little bit of the time spent is just to research, who are you actually reaching out to? It has to be on topic.
Reaching out to the right people. Okay, so that's great. But someone asked here, what % of open emails is a good rate or a good open rate? Of course, 100% will be opens is that person. Well, now we're talking about cold outreach, for publicity. It's not like your open rate for your emails, you're sending to your list, and that would be. Depends on the industry, but I think anything 30% and above, that's considered really, really good. 20% can even consider be good in some industries. But now we're talking about cold emails, Dmitry. So what's a good open rate there, you would say, if you're reaching out cold?
Yeah. I mean, cold email can be anything, and I've done I coach people how to do sales emails and all these other types of emails, partnership emails. But if you're doing just cold email outreach to get publicity or PR or exposure, or get guest article of yours published, anything above 20, 30 is really good. You want to see how many times a person opens the email, and I do that too. I try and custom tailor things. See
what tool do you use? Your own tool for this, or anything else that you recommend people?
Besides my own tool, so my own tool has all that tracking in it, and it's meant for PR outreach. But I actually use Mixmax for Gmail, which is really nice. Mixmax, it's I think it's $9 a month, but there's a free version too. But the good thing about Mixmax is it lets you create these sequences, and I see this problem all the time. People just create a list of people, they go after them, they do their outreach, and then they don't do anything. And 90% of actual replies come from the third follow-up, from the fourth follow-up. And so it's just important to follow up. You annoy people a little bit, and you but sometimes I see just no follow-ups, and it's usually not, I try not to be too annoying, but I do follow-ups for most.
I followed up 3 to 4 times with some people for the summit. I was some people had said to me, hey, I'm going to promote this. I'm going to be on the summit. We didn't schedule the interview or whatever. I followed up a lot, but they appreciated it because they said yes. And I think cold may be a little bit different, but I think even better, like, I mean, something that could be a shortcut to this, like cold is, you know, I mean, I know some people might not know everyone, but like building a relationship and getting in before you do that cold pitch, I think that can be even more powerful. I was interested to hear maybe from Andreea if you found this, like for Publicity, like building a relationship. Let's say you want to get featured on this magazine, and like first you're building the relationship in some way, like helping them, adding value, and then you're reaching out. Have you, what mix do you think? I mean, for especially for people starting out here, I mean, the cold, then they're getting a lot of negative responses at first because they're reaching out cold, but rather having the relationship, and your chances is much higher to get a yes in the first place. So what's your approach to this, and what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I try to do this as much as I can also. So oftentimes I will follow someone on Twitter and start retweeting some of their stuff or start commenting. And I'll do this sometimes months before I plan on reaching out, or if it's someone that I just learned about, then I'll do it as soon as I can before reaching out to them. I've also found that friending them on Facebook is a good way to get their attention, and I'm not going to friend them so I can pitch myself and pitch through Facebook, but I'm friending them so I can get on their radar, and I'll start liking their stuff or commenting, and of course it's all genuine, you know, I'm not forcing myself to do it, and if I don't agree with them, then I'm not going to comment or share, so it's like it has to be something that I believe in and I support as well. I've also gone on their blog and commented and left comments on the blog, and then also followed them or connected with them on LinkedIn as well. So yes, I think it's really important to do that. And I've done that with great success, and other people that have approached me have done that as well. And it totally works because you are getting on someone's radar before you quote unquote need them for something. So it's really important to build that relationship as much as you can.
For sure. And like, I mean, it's constantly, if you see like an article you like, let's say on Business Insider, and you want to get featured there, like start sharing the article, start making suggestions to that, editor or the writer there, and then eventually reaching out. If you're going to reach out cold right away and like pitch your thing, yeah, it can work for sure. But chances that you're going to get maybe a no and not a response in the first place is much higher, unless your pitch is really good, obviously, that you have something to come with. And I don't know, Jesse, you wanted to share something here?
Well, yeah, I was just it just occurred to me as they were talking, if you're on one media outlet or channel, let's just say a podcast, for example, because I have a lot of experience with that, is to like stack forward that appearance you did get into introductions to 1, 2, or 3 other people. And it's such an easy, I mean, it's a really like high leverage way to go about getting onto the different shows or getting onto the different blogs that cover your industry or your area of focus. So for example, if I just wrapped up an interview on a podcast, maybe I'll chat a little bit with the host after we record, and then maybe beforehand or afterhand, I look at, hey, what are some of the other people he's interviewed? If I want to meet some of them, it's the perfect time to be like, hey, I saw you had so-and-so on your show a month ago or two. Have you guys stayed in touch? I'd love to meet him. If you could drop a line and connect us, I'd really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And then, this leverages the existing relationship and perhaps the benefit that this media host, this media gatekeeper perhaps has with other people you want to get in touch with. And it's so much easier to respond to a warm introduction than it is to reach out or like prep weeks in advance before you think you might want to contact somebody. If you can find somebody that can make an introduction and you've done something substantial with that person, don't be afraid to ask for introductions to other people, because I've found it's been one of the easiest ways to get additional bookings, additional exposure without, quote, going through the front door.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And actually, that's what, I mentioned that on the interview with Selena Su, and we talked about that. I connected with Primoz Bosic. She was also one of the speakers here on the summit. Then he got featured on Business Insider. He recommended me because I had something good to share with that editor, the writer there. And then I got featured. The article went, really well. And then I introduced a lot of my friends to be featured on Business Insider too, and that in return added value. Like Jesse Krieger was one of them, Selena Su was one, so a lot of other people I introduced too. And now what's I mean, Selena got a lot of opportunities from this. Like now she's getting, as if you wasn't wearing that interview, it's like got featured 3 times. And that was from the editor I introduced her to, Chandler Bolt. He got featured there too, got like 80,000 views. So it was a lot of people that got this. But like a lot of people, I think they end it with, okay, I got featured. Like, okay, cool, I got featured. But why don't they take that relationship and move forward with it, build like a real relationship rather than just seeing it as one media hit, whatever it is. Like that's not how, at least that's not how I view it. And I was interested, like go back to what Dmitry said before about like you included a lot of kind of social proof in that if it's a cold email. But I was curious to hear if you don't have a lot of social proof, how you would go about doing such an email.
Yeah. So just speaking more about building relationships too, I like basically subscribe to the whole notion. That's how I build most of my contacts. And, you know, when we started Polar, we had pretty much nothing. We couldn't really talk about any kind of proven points or anything sexy in the email. And so it was all about providing value to the reporters and journalists and influencers and bloggers up front. So in this email, it's a little bit cool social proof that I kind of shared. And then I'm like, look, I have some content for your blog, which is value. But if you're a nobody, it's really hard to just like get attention of somebody. So you have to really work double overtime to really figure out what is it that you can create that will be very valuable to the reporter or journalist that doesn't involve your service offering, doesn't involve your product. And so what we did is we created topical studies, mini polls on very hot topics at the time. And this works all the time. At the time, iOS 7 was coming out, and we were polling people heavily trying to figure out, is iOS 6 versus iOS 7? Which one do people prefer? There's a lot of articles on this. And so I would check in every morning to see who's writing about this topic and what are they happening really hot topics. I go Tech Meme a lot. Tech Meme is kind of like a mecca for all the bloggers. All of them go to the site. The site links out all the hottest stories that are happening right now. And so I was looking there and I would see these people are talking about iOS 7 versus iOS 6 or PS4 versus the Xbox. You know, like these are the hot topics happening now. Had nothing to do with what I was doing or I was trying to promote. But to build that relationship, I would run a little case study. I would run a little poll. I would get some data, and I would pitch that data to a journalist or influencer saying, listen, you're writing about this topic. You're speculating whether people have iOS 7 or iOS 6. I ran this poll. I have some data for you. Would love for you, know, like it would be useful for you. Any feedback would be great. And people loved it because I would be doing some of their work for them almost.
Yeah.
Like figuring out little ways like that to improve their content. I always proofread all the articles of people that I want to get a response from. And if there's any spelling mistakes or grammar issues, I always email them and say, here's how to improve, you know, like I found this issue. And, you know, they would be thankful. I would see that they would open the email. They might even fix it. They might say thank you. Anything that you need to push and give them value. You cannot start asking them for stuff. It's the point when you've overdone your value part is when you might want to ask something of them. You can't ask them up front because everybody asks them up front. Like it took me a year to even email Ashton Kutcher because I was going one by one and trying to figure out who is he after and what kind of people does he associate with. And I try to interview all of them. Once I interviewed all of them, then I reached out and said, listen, I've interviewed like 7 or 8 or 10 people here that you value a lot, and I'd love to interview you. And I did a lot of homework.
Let's talk about this, by the way. I think people would love to know, like, how did you even how did you manage to get his? I mean, email getting? Did you get in direct contact with Ashton Kutcher in this case? He
responded. Yeah, it was actually at the time. It was his Twitter handle at Gmail. That was the email he checked. He doesn't check that anymore. But yeah. So I mean, I followed basically what he did, and so I would figure out who is he talking about. And Ashton had this if you followed his, this was 2007. Or 2008, 2009, he had this aspiration to become an investor, but he has no idea about the investment, at all, startups, angels. He doesn't know anything about this, but he wanted to get in there. So he had some, what they call dumb money in startup world. He just wanted to put it into something and be called an investor. And so he put some stuff into Twitter and whatnot. And but he wanted to assimilate with that community. And so the Stanford Business School invited him to speak there. I went to hear him speak. I took some notes. He spoke of some people who he's, like he thinks are visionaries in the space. And so then I went after actual people. I interviewed Tom from Pandora, and I interviewed Ron Conway, who's kind of like the angel investing guru. And I've interviewed all these people. It took forever to actually find them, get an intro to them, and get them on a speaker series and arrange all this stuff. It took over a year to get them all on my podcast and interviewed. And once I got all that done, I reached out and very humbly said, like, I followed your stuff for a long time, and I've talked with all these people. And I've mentioned like your name to them, and we like the only missing piece here is you, and I'd love to get put together a group of people, all of them and you, on a panel and interview all you guys about startup investing. I wanted to get into the space, and I knew that he looked up to these people, and to be on a panel with those people for him would be kind of a big deal, even though he's like really popular celebrity and all that stuff. But aside from all that, there's these people that he's really like wants to be like. He wants to learn from. He wants to become an avid investor. And so, like he's like, cool. Basically his email was like one line. He was like, talk to Jesse. She like figures out my my schedule, and that was it. And so like I never really like. We corresponded basically with his like assistants going forward, just because like he's filming, and then he went to do 2.5 Men and stuff. But like we kept in touch, and now I know his aplus.com, like I know the editor there really well, but it took me a while to get to somebody like that. And like I just wanted that connection because like I was into interviewing people, and he was like a big celebrity, and he was in the startup space trying to get in there. So
awesome. This is a great story. People saying here, Dmitry did it. This is great. This is a great way to know someone. This is very useful information. Do the homework simply. I mean, it sounds very simple, but people don't do it. Like people reach out, and I mean, I get so many ways. People like simply not doing the homework before reaching out to me. We say, here someone else asks, what was the name again where all the bloggers go? What did
Mecca? techmeme.com. So I can put it up in the chat. It's
cool. Do that.
Techmeme.com. It's kind of like it's got all the stories on there. It's like tech news kind of stuff.
Got it. Okay, cool. So I wanted to kind of transition in also how to evaluate, publicity opportunities, specifically like when it comes to list growth. And let's start with Jesse, like in terms of evaluating you said in the beginning, you said where you like to get featured and where your strengths are, like you did a lot of podcasts, etc. But how do you feel like, you have got featured a lot of podcasts. Where are you seeing the most traction come from in terms of publicity, and how do you get more of that? Like that's kind of how I see it, at least for my own publicity I'm focusing on.
Well, I'll tell you the way I look at it is, I feel pretty like comfortable in this type of environment, right? So if you think about what else falls in the category, not just podcasts, I focused on producing video content every month and sharing that out through YouTube, but also pushing it through other channels and linking to it and making it available to people the same way some people would point to a website. So, I mean, even on this chat so far, somebody asked about publishing, and I put a link to a video I made where I'm just talking for 2 or 3 minutes about my approach to publishing, right? And so, like, once you find the channel through which you prefer communicating the best, my approach is just get a bunch of great content out there that touches on a lot of the key learning points, a lot of the problems or obstacles people face in trying to get success in this area. And the network effect is that you start to become the person about that topic. And so, I can't tell you, since I shifted from doing like interviews and podcasts about the content of Lifestyle Entrepreneur, which is more about how to start a location independent business and how to have, interesting lifestyle that leverages your interests and passions. As I switch more to publishing, And I started creating content and doing interviews and really speaking about and putting things out there on the topic of book creation, book publishing, book marketing. After about 20 to 30 interviews, blog features, videos, and features to other people's audiences, I started to notice more and more incoming referrals and media requests on that new topic that I was now talking about. So there's, I think, something to be said that maybe spans media and PR in the traditional sense versus just your own content creation and marketing strategies. You have the opportunity to define your own perspective on your space, on your industry, on your area of focus. And if you just create, this doesn't have to be a ton, but I bang out maybe 3 to 4 videos a month that are like 3 to 7 minutes long. And that ends up being like a quality piece of content a week on the same topic, same area of focus. The network effect from that gets you a lot of invitations, gets you to be in this situation where, you know, if people know somebody that's working on a book now, they say, oh, you've got to talk to Jesse. You know, he does so much with publishing and book launches. And once you're the person where somebody says, oh, you've got to talk to your name here, then that's an indicator you've gotten some traction and that you're doing something right. And the more you leverage that, the more inbound. I'm a big fan of inbound. I think the other two guests here, Andreea and Dmitry, seem to be really good with outbound and being diligent and researching. I guess my approach is more of like cover as many bases on the topic and area of book creation, book cover design, book marketing, pre-launch strategies, and get all that out there so that people can come in through different doorways and find me, then easily find the other stuff I've done, and then easily get in touch with me or refer or share content I've created with other people. I guess that network effect is something that's worth mentioning here if you're in the content creation and publishing biz. Is you know, I'm a big fan of opening my inbox and having like 3 or 4 people saying, you've got to talk to my friend Jesse, this guy's working on a book, this and that. And so I become reactive in many senses to people that have self-selected into wanting to talk to me about what my actual core business is and does, which is publish books. Yeah. So I hope that there's something useful in there, and it may not have been exactly what you were asking, but I just felt like it was a good point to make.
And we have some authors here, so maybe they can chime in here. But I'm interested, because I know, Andreea, you have obviously your e-commerce and online stores, and you have your personal brands. I'm interested to hear in terms of what's working really well for the list building side of things. I mean, you've been getting traditional media too, like, you know, magazines and all this, but you've also been on a lot of podcasts and, you know, online publications, guest posts, etc. So can you talk a little bit about, like, you know, both sides of things and what do you recommend maybe people getting started with, depending on what they're trying to do here, especially if you want to grow their list?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a lot of different strategies that have worked, and sometimes I will focus on the strategy that I think I'm the best at and just go to town with that strategy until I sort of get tired of it, or I get bored with it, or I want to challenge myself and do something else. In which case, what I'll do is I will think about, okay, what's my least favorite thing to do, or what's the thing that I'm not the best at? And how can I grow as a person and grow my business by using that? And for me, that thing was public speaking and videos and doing live events. So I spent a lot of time, my first few years doing the online business, I was just behind my computer, sending out a ton of emails and growing my business that way. And then at one point I was like, okay, I really hate public speaking. I don't think I'm good at it. I'm an introvert, and that's why I should be going for public speaking. So I changed my strategy, and I decided to pitch myself to Creative Live. I decided to pitch myself for conferences. I even went for keynote speeches. I mean, stuff that I had never done before. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get this done, but I know in order to grow my business and grow my list and grow my influence, I have to get it done. So I pitched Creative Live, and one of the reasons I pitched them is because I knew they had a huge audience and you get a lot of exposure. So for me, that was such a great way to get a ton of email subscribers. I think on the day I was doing teaching a 3-day class, and you were there from, I think, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. or maybe 3 p.m. And it's just you talking about a whole bunch of different things that you're teaching on. And just during that one day, I had like at least 1,000 new Facebook likes to my Facebook page. I had a ton of people sign up for my email list. And then again, it just repeated the next day and the last day when I was speaking at Creative Live. And then they also rebroadcast, like they've rebroadcasted my courses so many times. You know, every few months they'll rebroadcast what I taught 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And then I'll keep getting a ton of new email subscribers from there as well. So for me, doing that and having that platform has been really great. The other thing that I've done is I've gone to speak at events. So I strategically picked events where I knew my audience would be hanging out. And the way I knew that is that I emailed my list and I said, hey, what events do you plan on going to this year? And, you know, just reply and let me know. And I would make a list of the events that worked for my timeline and my schedule. And then I would pitch the organizers of those events. And I would say, hey, I would love to speak here. Here's the different topics that I can share with your audience. And then when you're meeting someone in person, I would constantly say, okay, go to my website and, you know, download this thing. And of course it was an opt-in that they would have to download. And sometimes, you know, the largest audience that I spoke to, I think was maybe 500 people, and I offered them a free downloadable thing, and a lot of them went and downloaded it, and it was just for like a half an hour talk. So, and plus I got to practice my public speaking and do something that I was totally like, there's no way I would ever speak on a stage, let alone in front of 500 people. So, so those things have helped me a lot, in addition to stuff that I do online, like content upgrades and all of that.
Yeah, that's all. I hear myself. It's funny. Yeah, so there's some feedback there, guys, when it's live. But yeah, this is awesome, Andreea. And I think we actually talked about the Creative Live story on the Branding Summit interview. So for Premium Pass students, you actually have access to that in the Branding Summit members area. But I wanted to briefly touch upon that because I know there's a good story. If people like here, they have, you know, a few minutes, they wanna hear more about that, how you actually got featured on Creative Live specifically. So can you share a little bit about that? I think it's a good approach, and I'm very interested myself to getting there, teaching like a class on virtual summits or whatever, and I actually got even an idea for the rebroadcasting thing they are doing now for what you can do for virtual summits. I might consider that in the future as well to just get more exposure. And they're still selling their classes, right, Andreea?
Mm-hmm. They are, yeah. I mean, and they are still they're not doing as many live classes as they used to, but they're still doing live classes and rebroadcasting a lot of them. But my story, it's very interesting because I saw a couple of other speakers being at Creative Live, and I was like, oh, that would be so fun to do, you know. Even though I'm scared of that, I want to try that too. So I emailed them and I said, I just watched your course. I think it was a Pinterest course. I can't remember. But I said, I watched your Pinterest course and I loved it. And because you cater to makers and creative entrepreneurs, I would love to come in and teach a class about publicity, because I know after looking at all the other courses you've done, I know this is a course that you haven't done yet, and here's why I'm qualified to do that. So they wrote back and they said, oh, you know, that's great. Can you send us a sample of a speech or a video or anything like that? And at that point, I didn't have any videos. So I was like, oh, okay, now I have to create a video. So I went and created a video, and it was one of my first videos, not so good at all. So I was like, here's my video. And I never heard from them again. So I was like, okay, obviously that was not a good video. You know, it was my first shot at doing video. So I waited a few more months, and then I reached out to them again with a different topic idea. And I said, I didn't mention anything about the fact that I reached out the first time, but I said, hey, I've been watching your, like I was basically pretending that it was my first time reaching out to them again, even though it was my second time. And this time I knew what they were looking for. So in the meantime, I added more videos to my website. I got a couple of speaking engagements on video. And I said, hey, I would love to teach on publicity from this angle. And I do have experience speaking. Here's a couple of videos that I've done. Here's the places where I've spoken at. And I would love to come in and teach this for your audience. And then right away they said, oh, we watched your video. Great stuff. Yes, we'd love to bring you in. Can we chat today? So I sort of I recognized what they were looking for the first time, and then I prepared with videos and speaking things, and I made sure I got more experience before actually pitching them. And then I pitched them again, and it worked the second time. But what Dmitry was saying before about following up, it totally works. And I would say most of my success with what I've done in my business is from my follow-up emails and not necessarily from my initial email. So you have to just keep going and keep trying and take different angles and just add more stuff to your knowledge base and your skills, and then pitch again and use a different angle or reach out to a different person until you can make it happen. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of Creative Live or something like a big opportunity like that, like if that was your first opportunity, even if they said yes, maybe you would blow that because you weren't ready for it. So it's actually good to get experience before like getting featured on the biggest podcast right away. It all sounds good, but then you can blow it because you're not ready for that yet. So Jesse, I think there was a question here too before. Maybe he answered.
And I got to run soon, unfortunately.
All right,
but this has been good stuff.
All good.
I was answering a couple questions in the chat box about video.
Yeah, so you feel free to take that. It was what else can you do to improve on being able to be in front of the camera and do public speaking? That is my fear, says April in the chat here. So if you want,
I'll just quickly repeat what I said there, which is, if you're starting to do video, don't be overwhelmed. Practice by picking one point that you want to make and 2 to 3 illustrating or supporting points that back that up. And then just write those on a big piece of paper or on a whiteboard behind the camera, and then just speak extemporaneously. So just start by trying to make a 2 or 3 minute video where you just make one point, right? Don't start by thinking you have to make like a 25-minute sales video or something comprehensive with all these edits. Just practice talking about a topic that you're knowledgeable about and having it come off and feel comfortable and natural. And the other point I said there is, if you're nervous beforehand, bouncing up and down on a trampoline is a great thing to do to get the blood flowing, and then sit down and hit record, and you just sort of segue right into it.
We just have one more question in the chat, and also then we're going to wrap this up. So we had one from Judy. So how do you find out what a blog's domain authority is? Maybe Dmitry is good. You focus on
So I use Moz, but you can also look at like a free tool, checkmoz.com. They update their domain authority. Like Majestic SEO is another tool. There's just Ahrefs, SEMrush. Like a lot of the tools show you the domain authority of a site.
Yep.
I just have Moz installed. It's a toolbar, and just any site I visit, it always tells me what the domain authority is, and I can judge from there if I want to reach out to them.
Do you use the free or the paid version of that?
I pay for Moz because Moz gives you all this other data, but I think you don't have to. You can install Moz toolbar and not pay, and they'll give you the authority for free. They'll tell you what the authority is.
Awesome. This has been great, and I think people here, they like it. I mean, Toastmasters here, someone says in the chat, is a great way to improve public speaking, obviously, to get this weekly, practice and with a group of people. So that's great. So let's go around so you guys can tell everyone where they can connect more with you. So Andreea, where's the best place to connect?
The best place would be at launchgrowjoy.com.
Awesome. And you have a lot of stuff there on Publicity too, especially, I mean, for anyone really it applies, but if you're an e-commerce owner, that's kind of who you help, the main audience. But I guess it's an overlap a little bit with, we have a lot of them here and they're still finding value. So there's an overlap. And Jesse Krieger, so where can people connect more with you?
You can find me at jessekrieger.com and lifestyleentrepreneurspress.com. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So if you have a book coming out or something like that, connect with Jesse. So Dmitry, where can people connect with you?
My site is criminally prolific, all one word like that, .com.
Awesome. And it's linked up below too, guys. So you can find it there. And you have the sites there, Jesse. You just posted in the chat. So it's good. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and to our panelists, our speakers here. Thanks so much for coming on as well. Thanks.
Thank you.